Welcome back to the Adventures of the Monad, which will look at life, the universe, and everything. My name is Kazim Kamal-ur-Rahim. In this series, I ask the question, where do we come from? Who are we, and where are we going? I post one presentation a week. Please subscribe to my website and hit the bell icon for notification of future videos. You can also leave comments and join in forum discussions on my website. In our journey through the concepts of reincarnation, I have spoken about the cycles of rebirth the monad undertakes. This allows a slow but steady expansion of consciousness to occur. One question that comes to mind is, why do we need to come down to the physical plane anyway? If we are, for argument's sake, focused in our 48-1 permanent atom, we have objective consciousness on this plane. Why have all the hassle of going into the much denser environment of the physical plane? The first thing I would say is that you may be focused at the top of the emotional body, but how far down this molecular structure are you actually conscious? So, even if you are objectively conscious on the emotional plane, there are likely to be parts of it that you are not. To even get here, you had to move your focus up to the emotional body from the 49-1 permanent atom located in the physical etheric body. So, you have had no choice but to descend to the 49th plane of matter to evolve. If you look even further back, you were once only conscious at the level of the mineral kingdom. You started off there by not even having your own etheric envelope. You shared this with a vast number of other developing monads. Now that we see we have come into the physical plane to evolve, could we just come as far as the etheric subplane and descend no lower? Yes, we could. And this is in fact the modus operandi that exists elsewhere in the solar system. However, it seems that retard monads like us really do need to come down to the school of hard knocks to get some sense beaten into us. I have already spoken about the attractive and repulsive monad in a previous presentation. So, to date, we have talked about the descent of the monad into matter and started to speak about its ascent back to its causal body. We got as far as the dissolution of the physical and etheric bodies and the entry of the monad into the emotional world, cloaked in its sub-envelopes of emotional matter. What is the monad hoping to achieve in its sojourn through this plane of matter? This and more are the topics of today's presentation. The main purpose of the emotional world is to allow the monad to purge itself of its emotional behavior and false beliefs. The first thing to note is that without the dampening effect of its physical body, the negative emotions are massively intensified. This is bad news, because anyone who died with a strong feeling of guilt, despair, shame, hate, or anger experiences self-inflicted hell. This lamentable state only changes when the monad rids itself of those pesky elementals that resonate to those lower frequencies. It quite literally is like emptying a sack full of hurt. No one can do this but you if you are trapped in this cycle of pain. You have to let go of these emotions. As an example, people obsessed with sex or addicted to drugs or alcohol have no means of satisfying their cravings. To experience these events, you need a physical body. I am sure you have heard of the term cold turkey. This is the uncomfortable stage any addict has to go through to break the cycle of addiction. I, however, mentioned that emotions are amplified 100-fold on the 48th plane. So, if you think cold turkey is an uncomfortable experience on plane 49, imagine what it must be like on the emotional plane. It is therefore a wise precaution to deal with any addictions you may have before you find yourself on the emotional plane, with no physical body to come back to. People with negative behaviors like stealing, violence, and greed need to realize its futility. Let's look at an over-attachment to material possessions. If you have something you value highly, you may be frightened that someone will take this from you. Well, guess what happens when you are at the mercy of your own misguided imagination? If the emotional world is one of fantasy, then if you fear theft, you end up having these things continually stolen from you. Your worst fears become your reality. None of this may actually be happening, but to you it is very real and uncomfortable. So, the emotional world is a place where you are given the opportunity to throw off your shackles. This may also mean coming to terms with the fact that some of your most cherished beliefs are fictitious. This can be a rude awakening for a religious devotee or an atheistic scientist. For those that did have a concept of an afterlife, like a mystic for example, would seem to have all their beliefs confirmed. This is not because those beliefs were true, but in the world of fantasy and illusion, they are just confirmed back to you in the way that you had perceived them. What do these mystics often try to do? They go and find hapless mediums and communicate their findings to them. Remember, you are no more intelligent on the emotional plane than you were on the physical plane. The scales finally do fall from the metaphorical eyes of such a mystic. This happens when they migrate their consciousness to higher subplanes on their way to the mental plane. When they get to these more refined environments, they realize the illusory nature of their thoughts and beliefs. Unfortunately, it is too late to undo the damage they have done with their fanciful communications with the mediums. Why? Because when you get into the higher subplanes of the emotional world, it is no longer possible to communicate with the 49th plane of matter. To reiterate, any suffering a monad experiences on the lower emotional subplanes are entirely self-induced. The important thing to note is that they are temporary and of our making, and never for eternity. This is such an important concept to get your head around. How many souls are terrified by their religious beliefs that condemn them to an everlasting damnation? What an utterly debilitating life view to hold. Hylozoics is all about giving the student an accurate world and life view of the universe they inhabit. How do you get yourself out of this self-inflicted mess? The monad can only ascend higher into more refined environments when it has rid itself of the lower elemental essences. This only happens when these essences are no longer vibrating, and they drift back into the general pool of elemental essences outside the confines of the emotional envelope. Getting back to the warning I gave to you in the last presentation, don't let your emotional body stratify. Having said that, most people do. So, when you stop using your 48-7 molecules, they drift out of your emotional body and you ascend to the 48-6 subplane. When you have finally shed your 48-5 molecules, you are unable to see the physical etheric plane anymore. I previously mentioned that the three lowest emotional subplanes were heavily intertwined with the lowest three physical subplanes, 49-5 to 49-7. This is why some souls think they are still on earth, rather than on a completely different plane of matter. Friends and family should not try to contact recently deceased monads. Doing so slows down the dissolution of the monad's emotional body. If you love them, let them go. Once you get into the higher subplanes of the emotional world, these being subplanes 48-4 to 48-2, everything a monad desires, even subconsciously, manifests. This is why these planes are called heaven. You can just imagine how pleased a religious person must be when they get into this consensus environment. They pride themselves on having obtained salvation and must sit around feeling very smug. However, as time passes, it slowly dawns on them that what they are experiencing is illusory. They are now ready to move on. As I keep repeating, a monad is only objectively conscious on the subplane that corresponds to their activated molecules. These are on the subplanes where they have their focus of consciousness. For most people, that is in the subplanes 48.7 to 48.4. So if the process of death is shedding your envelopes and the molecules within them, what happens when you have shed the last of your 48.4 elemental essences? You gently slip into a dreamlike state. There is no other option. The environment that was objective around you has gone. It is now time to discard the emotional body. What is left? The mental body and the lower causal sheath. The husk of the emotional body is almost completely empty. It is now a shell of its former self, quite literally. It still inhabits the emotional subplane where it was previously located. Mischievous elemental clusters can animate this shell if they choose to do so. More on this later. As has been mentioned in the past, no human monad has the ability to be conscious on the atomic subplanes 49.1 and 48.1. The reason is because the subtle bodies at present only contain molecular matter. So, briefly unconscious, the monad moves from one plane of matter to another. In this case, it moves from the emotional plane to the mental plane. Now, back to those husks. Emotional bodies never completely dissolve once they have been discarded. Some emotional molecules and entangled mental molecules remain. Remember, these molecules are composed of elemental essences. They are involving secondary matter. When I mentioned that your envelopes are beings in their own right, well, now you have an emotional husk of its former self that contains remnant memories and behavior patterns of its former owner. This matter itself must be tertiary, as it is only tertiary matter that has an active memory. Secondary matter does not. It is only passively conscious. This discarded envelope floats around the emotional world with a temporary life of its own. Elemental matter remaining in the envelope is evolving downwards, so it instinctively returns to heavier vibrating subplanes. Once on the three lowest subplanes, these shells can be contacted by mediums and clairvoyants. These shells are able to convince these gullible souls that they are actually communicating with the deceased person. More evolved monads are capable of completely disintegrating their emotional bodies before departing for the mental plane. They do this precisely to avoid these shells causing mischief. For most people incarnate today, when they pass over, the mental world is going to be a totally subjective experience. Once there, they experience uninterrupted bliss with a godlike sense of omnipotence and omnipresence. Why should this be the case? Because everything the mind can conceive appears in an instant. It becomes a living reality. Once an individual gets to the mental world, its imagination, whether objective or subjective, creates its own heaven. The reason is because there is no consensus environment on the mental plane. Young souls do not regain consciousness in the mental world. They ascend through it in deep sleep. Their undeveloped mental bodies quickly disintegrate. 2 community and 3 cultured souls do not regain objective consciousness in the mental plane. Why? Because their monad is focused in the emotional 48.1 permanent atom. At this stage of consciousness, the monad is unable to perceive the mental world. They do, however, regain subjective consciousness, which is internally focused. This is equivalent to being in a blissful dream. 4 compassionate souls remain objectively conscious on the lowest subplanes of the mental plane, 47.7. The reason this occurs is because the monad has taken the I2 and moved its focus into the 47.4 permanent molecule. This mental environment is not new to the four-compassionate soul, as it has experienced it during its nocturnal adventures. 5 enlightened souls regain objective consciousness on the 47-7 subplane. This monad is now centered in its 47-1 permanent atom, which is located in the higher causal body. This body is located on the second triad. An enlightened monad is well accustomed to the mental world. If you are sitting around or floating around, which is probably more apt, on the mental plane in a subjective bubble, can anyone communicate with anyone else? Yes. 4 compassionate and 5 enlightened souls are able to chat to one another. Remember, for them, this world, at least the lowest subplane, is objective to them. They are able to gain knowledge from the Akashic records or objectively revel in the beauty and bliss of the heavenly mental world. So what is a monad doing on this plane? We saw how on the emotional plane it was ridding itself of all sorts of delusions and emotions. Up on the mental plane, the monad's main objective is contemplation. It sets about contemplating its successes and failures of its past incarnation. Once this activity is complete, it is free to move on. There is another possibility that is available to the monad on the mental plane. It is able to fulfill unrealized aspirations. This is the last chance to get things out of your system before this particular incarnation is drawn to a close. Any unresolved behavioral patterns that are not fully dealt with are stored as skandhas. These are molecular patterns that get attached to the permanent atoms and molecule of the monad's triad structure. These then have to be dealt with in future incarnations. These are your famous traits and habits that I have been continuously banging on about. Like the emotional body, the mental body is composed of layers of material. These, however, cannot disintegrate while we are still utilizing the level of consciousness they endow us with. The time spent in the mental world depends on the person's intellect and how much material they have to contemplate. Once this process of introspection is completed, the mental body has all but disintegrated. It is now time for the lower causal body to reunite with the higher causal body. So, we have finally made it home, back to where we started this incredible journey. A journey we have made thousands of times since we causalized into the fourth, the human kingdom. The monad now experiences an incredible state of bliss. This unification is the return of the prodigal son. That story may ring a bell. Well, now you know what it was referring to. The causal matter that descends with the lower causal sheath around the monad's subtle bodies now deposits the experiences, knowledge and abilities it has gained. This goes into the storehouse of the soul. This is what the soul is all about. It is a collection of knowledge, experience and abilities. It is not you. You are the monad. These are the memories of your adventures, the adventures of the monad. If an incarnation has gone well, the bulk of the causal matter in this envelope is more refined and active. If the incarnation was a complete failure, the guardian angel may prevent the last incarnation's experiences from contaminating the soul. This does not mean things are forgotten. The monad still has its skandhas stuffed full of traits and habits, and there is the little matter of the debt collectors. The lords of karma see everything and don't forget. Only 5 enlightened souls are able to consciously experience the bliss of the causal world. Here they can learn from the Akashic records, which are a grade higher than the mental Akashic matter. They don't just witness events, they know why they occurred in the first place. This avoids misinterpretation. Enlightened souls can communicate with their masters. All 5 enlightened souls are accepted disciples. You cannot gain enlightenment until you are adopted by a master. As humans, we are not able to complete our evolution alone. Having said that, we do nothing alone. Without the devas managing most aspects of our material lives, we would be helpless. 4 compassionate souls have subjective perception of their causal life. This allows causal knowledge to permeate into their internally focused consciousness. For the remaining 99% of humanity, time in the causal world can be considered a good night's sleep. I have come to the end of my series of presentations looking at reincarnation. To finish off, I wish to quickly look at how reincarnation is perceived by one system of belief that has it at its core. Some Buddhists believe that humans can reincarnate into any one of 6 realms. They also believe that a soul, they don't know about the monad, can jump up and down these 6 levels in successive incarnations depending on karma and merit. The 6 realms in descending order are the God realm, the demigod realm, the human realm, the animal realm, the ghost realm, the hell realm. This view of existence could be compared to jumping up and down grades at school. We may have been animals in the past, and we may be gods in the future, but for now we are humans. If you look carefully at this list, you may notice that the 5 non-human realms actually relate to specific stages of the afterlife between human incarnations. The animal realm. It is possible for a recently deceased human to temporarily possess an animal or even a plant, to delay their departure from the physical world, 49.5 to 49.7. The ghost realm. A deceased person with a strong attachment to the physical world may decide to remain in limbo in the etheric world, 49.2 to 49.4. The hell realm. An emotionally disturbed person may endure some unpleasant turmoil in the lower subplanes of the emotional world, 48.5 to 48.7. The demigod realm is where most people spend some time in the upper emotional world, 48.2 to 48.4. Here their dreams and desires become instant realities. In the God realm, 4 compassionate and 5 enlightened people can consciously experience bliss and godlike senses of omnipotence and omnipresence in the mental world. Some Buddhists also believe you can reincarnate almost immediately after you pass over. This is true for very advanced souls who can forego rest and recuperation that is well advised after each incarnation. In my next presentation, I wish to go on and look at paranormal phenomena and describe the various categories involved. If you wish to read a script of this presentation or leave comments, links to my website are in the description box below. Thank you.